All right. We're on Daniel 10. I'm so excited for tonight. I'm telling you, the guy, this is so amazing. Daniel 10 is just the setup for the final vision he has, the final prophecy he has in chapter 11 and 12. Um, in chapter 11 is ridiculous. And I mean that in the um, all inspired. I cannot believe how accurate this prediction was. Um, it's one of those chapters where it's so accurate and so detailed that we have to almost go verse by verse and say, here's what Daniel predicted, here's when it happened. Here's who Daniel predicted, here's when they happened. If you remember his other visions, now last week was like this super accurate timeline for the showing of the Messiah, right? To the day. But previous scriptures about the future and the empires have mostly been, don't get me wrong, all inspiring and amazing. But Medo Persia and then Greece. There's going to be four from Greece. You know, the basics. We get into real detail. Daniel gets into real detail in chapter 11. Chapter 11 is one of those chapters that, if I was not a Christian, would do a pretty good job on its own of informing me and making me recognize that this book is supernatural in origin, because it is impossible to be human in origin when you read the vision Daniel had and the information God gave him. Um, so we'll start. Chapter 10 is a little tough. Chapter 10's there's a lot going on, but it's all a setup. The circumstances of the final vision is coming in 11. So starting out with 1 to 3, in the third year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, whose name was called Belshazzar. The message was true, but the appointed time was long, and he understood the message and had understanding of the vision. In those days, I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. I ate no pleasant food, no meat nor wine came into my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. All right, so we get a timeline here. Third year of Cyrus. At this point, the first wave of exiles from Babylon had already left for Jerusalem under the leadership of Ezra. Okay. And if you want to read about that, that's Ezra chapters 1 and 2 is where we get the information about that. The message is true. The appointed time is long. Again, like I said, it sets the stage here for the spectacular prophecy coming in chapter 11. It's going to describe a time of great persecution, a time of great tribulation for the nation of Israel and for the people of Israel. And it says the appointed time is long. The way that reads, the implication here is that the period is going to be a long and strenuous one. It's going to involve great conflict. And it's going to be, well, to be honest, it's going to be a lot of trouble for the people of God. All right. And Daniel is mourning here. And the commentators aren't sure why he's mourning, because he hasn't fully received all the information yet. Some of them think there's a couple things he might have been upset about. One, the first wave of exiles was not as great as you would like it to be. All right. The numbers weren't as great as you would like it to be. Some of them think maybe it's because Ezra, when they get back, he is facing opposition in rebuilding the temple. And that might be bothering Daniel. And Daniel can't go. I mean, he probably could, but we know almost for certain Daniel is about 84 years old at this point. And with his position in the government, he probably can do more for the exiles right where he's at than he can if he were to go back with them to Jerusalem. All right. So he wasn't on a full fast. All right. He was still eating, but he was eating, it was more of a self-denying. You know, the biblical fast is abstaining from food altogether. He was still eating, but it looks like it was some sort of self-denial because he was upset. All right. Verses 4 to 6. Now, on the 24th day of the first month, as I was by the side of the great river, that is the Tigris, I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose waist was girded with golds of Uphaz. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like torches of fire, his arms and feet like burnished bronze in color, and the sound of his words like the voice of a multitude. All right. Who is this person here? Some think it is an unnamed angel, okay, that has come to talk to Daniel, walk him through this, an angel of high rank. I have seen a few make the claim that it was a pre-incarnate Jesus. I don't think that's the case, and I'll tell you why later. We're going to see why it's probably not Jesus, and I think you'll agree. Um, so this angelic feature appears before him, and one other thing I will point out: another creature that was angelic in nature is mentioned in Ezekiel, and the comparison is really, really close. All right, to another angelic feature mentioned. So we're going to go for this class with angelic creature. I'll tell you why in a little bit here. Verse 7, and I, Daniel, alone saw the vision. For the men who were with me did not see the vision, but a great terror fell upon them so that they fled to hide themselves. All right, you know what this tells you? This is a supernatural vision. All right, Daniel was seeing it, and something about what Daniel was going through during this vision struck terror in the hearts of his comrades. They couldn't see what he saw, but they knew something supernatural was going on. So they did what most of us would do. They got the heck out of there, right? I'm not too proud to say I'd be running too. All right. If I didn't know what was going on and I saw somebody acting in a similar manner, there's a New Testament example of this also. Remember Saul on the road to Damascus? He saw a vision of Jesus speaking to him. His comrades didn't see it. But depending on the account, they either ignored it or they fell down in terror at what was going on, even though they couldn't see it. All right. Same situation is happening here. Verses 8 and 9. And again, everybody knows how this works. I'm going to keep going, but if you got something to say, please say it. Okay. Therefore, I was left alone when I saw this great vision, and no strength remained in me, for my vigor was turned to frailty in me, and I retained no strength. Yet I heard the sound of his words, and while I heard the sound of his words, I was in a deep sleep on my face, with my face to the ground. All right. Look, Daniel's known as a very godly man. He's had experiences like this in the past, similar to it, but even he was unnerved to a degree by this one. This must have been a really powerful vision, because he says, my vigor, in other words, I was in pretty good shape, but it has turned to frailty. And if you look at the Hebrew here, it literally, I'll read what it means literally. A death-like paleness combined with grotesque wrenching of the facial features. All right. So whatever was going on was really messing with him. And, he's a man of God. He's seen visions before. This one got to him. This was super personal. And, one of the commentators said, to judge it by the description, the trance experience was not one to envy. We'd all like to see a vision from God and everything. This particular one, by the way Daniel describes it, wasn't envious. Now we're going to see, unlike some of the visions in the Quran, the being is very loving, is going to bring him back quickly. All right. If he's feeling fear, if he's feeling anxiety, he's going to bring him back quickly, as he introduces himself here in 10 and 11. Suddenly a hand touched me, which made me tremble on my knees and on the palms of my hands. And he said to me, O Daniel, man, greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak to you, and stand up, for now I've been sent to you. So while he was speaking this word to me, I stood trembling. All right. So Daniel's dealing with a weakness. All right. And what's this angel do? He strengthens him with the touch of a hand, right? We all can get that. We all understand that. If we're in a bad place, if we're down on our hands and knees, sometimes just a touch on the shoulder is a big help, isn't it? And that's what he experienced here. This is the second time. We talked about this last week. This is the second time Daniel's been called greatly beloved. What a title for a human being to get, right? Greatly beloved by God. And if you really look at the context to it, it is in relation to Daniel's favored status. He has a favored status, in that he is given by God unbelievable revelation to pass on to the rest of us. All right. He's favored and he gets that. And so it's time for Daniel to hear what's going on. It's time for Daniel to understand what's going on. And the angel says, we need you to get up on your feet. Let's talk about this. Verses 12 to 14. Then he said to me, do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard. And I have come because of your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. And behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I have been left alone there with the kings of Persia. Now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision refers to many days yet to come. All right, this is where it gets a little interesting. All right. And I don't want to pass over the begin because of the cool stuff in the middle about this spiritual battle and Michael coming to help. I don't want to get past the first part here because it's something that we need to recognize as important. He said, I have come. Why? Because of your words. Class, if anybody thinks that prayer doesn't matter, it matters. All right. God sent an angel to assist Daniel because of his words, and not just his words, but the persistence in his prayers. 21 days straight. I'm not sure I've ever prayed for the same thing 21 days straight. Right. He had persistence, and God heard him, and God sent him, sent an angel to assist him. And I guess the point is, it's for the person who prays, there's meaning to it. It's not just therapeutic. All right. While it has therapeutic effects for us, it actually means someone. And you know why? Because someone's listening. All right. We aren't speaking words into the empty universe. There's a God of the universe out there that's hearing us. All right. And he will send help. So he says, I've been sent, but I got held up. I got held up by the Prince of Persia, right? Here is the reason. That verse right there is the reason I don't think it's the pre-incarnate Jesus. Would the pre-incarnate Jesus need help? No, he wouldn't. Now, while it's true that Jesus here on earth had angels ministering to him in his human form, the pre-incarnate Jesus, I can't find any way or any reason he would need the assistance of an angel. So that's why I think that what he's speaking to is not a pre-incarnate vision of Jesus, but an actual angel. So this is some kind of angelic being. He comes up against the prince of the kingdom of Persia, and we know that this prince was some kind of angelic being, only on the other side. You know what I mean? It was a demonic being who stood against the angelic messenger. When you see this prophecy, if I was Satan, I would send everybody I could to stop the message from getting through also. I would do it immediately because this message that Daniel's going to receive is so awe-inspiring in the fact that he received it hundreds of years before it happened. I would probably do the same thing if I was on the other side of this. So apparently this was a demon of some high rank who interfered with this angel and kept him delayed for 21 days. Hey, good for Daniel for praying for 21 days straight, right? Good for Daniel for doing that, because you got to wonder, what if he had stopped at 15 or 16 or 20? Would the answer have reached him? We don't know. So he says, I'm dealing with this prince of Persia. He's hindering my approach to you. And then look who comes to the rescue. The archangel Michael, right? One of the angels that we all recognize. Michael, one of the chief priests, if you look at Michael, if you can read about him in Revelation chapter 12, you can read about him in Jude 9. All right. Michael is often seen in the Bible as one of those angels that's associated in battles between good angels and bad angels. All right. And I think it's interesting that this angelic messenger was held up for 21 days. Michael comes, and then guess what? He's good to go. Right. Michael's a powerful angel. And my mind popped into, if this message that is coming to Daniel is important, why didn't God just push aside this prince of Persia and let this angelic messenger get through it? Why allow that conflict? And so I looked into that a little bit to try to figure out what it was. And, most of the commentators believe that this was training for Daniel. Persistence in prayer isn't something that comes naturally to us. It has to be trained in you. And almost every commentator thinks sometimes God will delay this, because if God answered, as great it would be, if God answered every one of our prayers in 8 seconds, can you imagine what our prayer life would be? It'd be a series of one-off wishes. That's what it would be. There'd be no persistence because we're getting the answer immediately after we ask for it. So persistence in prayer is something that needs to be trained into us, praying for the same things, even if we don't get a response we want, or even if we get the most dreaded response of all, wait, right? Even if we get that one. Persistence is important. And he goes on to say, look, this vision is what is going to happen to your people in the latter days. Okay. Now, I will tell you right off the bat, this is going to be another one of those near far. Okay. There is going to be very clear cut fulfillment of many of the prophecies. And then we're going to get to a verse where it's going to flip and it's going to go from near fulfillment to future, even to us. All right. We talked about this guy last week. There's going to see some of this being fulfilled under Antiochus Epiphanes, Antiochus the Fourth, who was called the Antichrist of the Old Testament. All right. But then there's going to be a point here in chapter 11 where it's going to flip and we're going to go to even further latter days, where we're going to pick up information about what we call the Antichrist of the New Testament, the actual Antichrist of the end. How do we know that? It's going to be clear cut. When we get to it, you'll see, yep, this has definitely already happened, and yep, this has not happened yet. It's a really clear delineation. We'll be able to see it clearly. Verses 15 and 19. When he had spoken such words to me, I turned my face towards the ground and became speechless. And suddenly, one having the likeness of the sons of men touched my lips, that I opened my mouth and spoke, saying to him who stood before me, my Lord, because of the visions, my sorrows have overwhelmed me, and I have retained no strength. For how can this servant of my Lord talk with you, my Lord? As for me, no strength remains in me now, nor is any breath left in me. Then again, the one having the likeness of a man touched me and strengthened me. And he said, O man greatly beloved, fear not. Peace be to you, be strong, yes, be strong. So when he spoke to me, I was strengthened and said, let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me. All right. It's interesting. Daniel started on the ground, got back on his feet. Now he's back on the ground. All right. This was quite the experience that he went through. And he's back on the ground because the vision, what's coming to him about the tribulations that his people are going to face, it's overwhelming. The word sorrows here, it talks about a twisting, writhing pain. And in fact, in most places in the Bible where you find that Hebrew word being used, it refers to the pain of childbirth. All right, that's sort of what he was dealing with. So he's so affected by this vision, he can barely breathe. He feels weak. And he really not in a position mentally to deal with the complexities of prophecy. But this angel touches him, strengthens him. God strengthened him through an intermediary to allow him to deal with what's coming. We're going to do verse 20 through the first verse of chapter 11. Okay, that's going to be just sliding right in. Yes, Kim.
So he is actually seeing this vision while this angelic being is talking to him at the same time. Is that what you're saying?
That's my
He's
understanding of it.
seeing,
Yes,
okay,
he's
he's
seeing
seeing
it.
what's
It's being narrated to him. And there's more to come, but what he knows for sure is what he's seeing and what's going to be coming from the angel is bad news for his people. And
okay.
that's what's got him really upset. Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. So we'll go through verse 1. That's kind of how this goes before you jump into the actual prophecy. Then he said, do you know why I have come to you? And now I must return to fight with the prince of Persia. And when I have gone forth, indeed the prince of Greece will come. But I will tell you what is noted in the scripture of truth. No one upholds me against these except Michael, your prince. Also, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I, stood up to confirm and strengthen him. Wow, that's an interesting couple of verses. So Daniel's going to receive the answer to his prayer here, but the messenger, his battle's not over. He's got to go back and deal with this prince of Persia and then deal with what he calls the prince of Greece. And most commentators believe the reason this is the prince of Persia and the prince of Greece is because demonic forces are influencing Persia and demonic forces are influencing Greece in order to bring trouble to God's people. That's why they're given these particular names, Prince of Persia, Prince of Greece. He says, no one upholds me against these except Michael. Michael seemed to be this angelic guardian of Israel. He's battling against demonic representation of Persia. He's battling against the demonic representation of Greece or any other country that opposed God's people here. So, one thing to notice that at this particular time on earth, Israel was lowly and weak. They really were. Still a lot in captivity. A few had gone back. They're just trying to rebuild. But at this time in heaven, they have the greatest representative of all, don't they? The one in charge of everything. All right. Continuing on chapter 11, because this is one of the most, it's not just amazingly fulfilled, but specifically fulfilled um, prophecies in the Bible. It's going to predict history over 375 years and then a latter day history beyond that is still yet in our future. Um, this is one of those chapters again that is so specific that if you deny supernatural revelation, you are forced to say this was written after the fact. That's the only way they can get around this. Because even the critics of Christianity who do not believe the Bible recognize the specificity of this particular prophecy. And the only way they can wrap their brains around it is it was written later. All right, folks, it wasn't. It wasn't written later. In fact, we're going to get a little piece of evidence later that it wasn't. We're going to get a little piece of evidence from outside the Bible that this was around well before this time. So I will never entertain the late dating of this book. And you know why? Because I don't think God's a deceiver. I think we have this book dated. Almost every historian agrees with it, unless you have an agenda against supernatural revelation. If you've got that agenda, then you're forced to say, had to be later, and I'm really not going to consider anything else. And that's where the critics are at this point. All right. Verse 2 of chapter 11. And now I tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and the fourth will be far richer than them all. By his strength, through his riches, he will stir up all against the realm of Greece. All right. This prophecy is so accurate that we're going to have to read a verse and then we'll talk about when it was fulfilled. Because if we read a group of verses, we might read 2 or 3, but if we read 10, there's just too many steps. So we're going to take it slow. So the angel told Daniel here there's going to be 3 more kings in Persia until a fourth arose. All right. And the fourth king was going to be strong. He was going to be rich, and he was going to oppose the realm of Greece. All right. That's how we were going to know who this was. There is a fulfillment here. This is fulfilled in the Persian king, and you've probably heard of him, Xerxes. Okay. Xerxes is the king by which this was fulfilled. In these visions and insights that we're getting regarding the future of the Persian and Greek empires, they're super relevant because those 2 empires both tried to wipe out the Jewish people. Both of them did under different rulers. The Persian Empire tried to do it under this gentleman, under Xerxes. All right. And if you want to read about that, read the book of Esther. Remember, that's the king when Haman tried to have all the Jews murdered. That's where you can read about him and the plot to wipe out the Jewish people. The Greeks tried to wipe out the Jewish people under the gentleman we'll be talking about later, Antiochus IV, when he attempted to kill every Jew who would not convert to the culture and the gods of Greece. All right. So that's why it's focused on Persia and Greece here. Verses 3 and 4. Then a mighty king will arise who will rule with great dominion and do according to his will. And when he has arisen, his kingdom will be broken up and divided towards the 4 winds of heavens, but not among his posterity, nor according to his dominion with which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be uprooted even for others besides these. All right. So here's a mighty king is going to become with a great kingdom, and the kingdom's not going to last, but it's going to be divided. After the death of the mighty king, it's going to be divided how many ways? 4 ways. All right. It's going to be divided 4 ways. And we all know who this is, right? This was fulfilled under the king Alexander the Great. All right. He died at age 32 after a drunken party in Babylon. And it was his kingdom was divided among four of his generals. Want to make sure I get this right. Not among his posterity, he says. So after Alexander's death, none of his heirs succeeded him. All right. They were either incapable mentally. There was three possible heirs, just so you know. There's a half brother named Philip. All right. And he was mentally deficient. He wasn't all there, so he couldn't rule. He had a son who was born after Alexander died, and an illegitimate son named Hercules. Um, the half brother and the son who died were designated co-monarchs. They each had a regent, but the regents started fighting among each other, and every single possible heir related to Alexander, to his posterity, was murdered. All right. So it was not in his murder. It was not in his posterity. Um, and this is really all he talks about with Alexander. All right, and you would think there'd be more to Alexander, but this is all he says, and there's a reason for that. Alexander, I don't know if you know this. This Alexander never did any harm to Jerusalem. Alexander allowed the people to basically rule themselves, to follow temple laws. Um, they basically had, while they were under Greek rule, they pretty much got to do their own thing. They weren't forced to follow Greek customs. They weren't forced to follow Greek gods. All right. And you know why? There's a really good and interesting reason why. It's also how we know that this was written before these things happened. All right. This is how we know. And we have extra biblical evidence. Every one of you have you heard of the Jewish historian Josephus? All right. He wrote 3 books. All right. One of them was a 20-volume set called Antiquities of the Jews. And I'm going to give you this. I really encourage you to read it later. I'm going to summarize for you, but I encourage you to read this later. He records Alexander coming to Jerusalem. All right. And if you want to read about it, you can Google this. It's Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews. It's book 11, chapter 8. All right. Book 11, chapter 8. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. You can read it on your own to get the details, but here it is in the gist of it. So Alexander's coming, and the high priest in Jerusalem, they're freaking out, all right, because they're about to be conquered, and they know it. But the high priest at the time, Jadus, has a vision, and God's saying, I want you to meet him at the gate. But you know what I want you to do? This is not something you would normally do. I want you to wear your full outfit, your full robe, your purple set, everything, especially the purple of the garb. And I want you to wear it, and I want you and the priest to meet him at the gate. All right. This is exactly what happens. Jadus, feeling better now because God's involved, goes to the gate. Alexander and his armies come up to meet them. When they get there, the generals are expecting to be able to plunder the city, kill the high priest, really put a stake in it. We're in charge now. And Alexander's going to have none of it. And his generals actually ask him, and you'll read this. They'll say, why are we not plundering the city? Why are we not killing these people? Why are you showing them honor? They don't deserve honor. Why are you, Alexander, showing them honor? You know what he said? He said, I had a vision that when we got to this gate, I was going to see someone in particular, and that's the man I saw in my dream. And it was the high priest Jadus in his full outfit and full gear. And so there was no slaughter. There was no plunder. He did not harm Jerusalem. In fact, he went to the temple. The priest took him to the temple. And you know what they did? They pulled out the scroll of Daniel and showed him this chapter and said, look, this is you. It was prophesied that you would conquer us. You would come here. This is you here in Daniel. All right. Alexander was so struck by that he actually went and offered, this is Josephus' words, Jewish historian, he offered a sacrifice. While he didn't necessarily believe in the God, he was encouraged by the priest, you're the one in this prophecy. And he offered a sacrifice, and ended up allowing them to maintain religious control over the people instead of forcing on them. Isn't that amazing? It's an amazing story that's um, relayed there, and you can read the whole thing, the whole chapter. It's just incredible when you read it. All right, so it's going to be divided after he dies. It's going to be divided among four generals, none of them according to his dominion, none of them according to his posterity. Um, and of those four, the next group of prophecies are going to focus on two of them. All right. This is the kings of the north and the kings of the south. Why those two? Because the promised land sat right in the middle of their kingdoms. And guess what was happening? They were battling back and forth among themselves for control of it. All right. So there's a lot of prophecy about them in this battle back and forth to control the promised land. And it's about the kings of the north and the kings of the south. That's where we pick up in verse 5. Also, the king of the south will become strong, as well as one of his princes. He shall gain power over him and have dominion. His dominion will be a great dominion. All right. So the king of the south is going to be strong. One of the four inheritors, one of the four generals of the empire was going to be a mighty king. He's going to be stronger and greater than the others. This is fulfilled in Ptolemy, Ptolemy, Ptolemy the first of Egypt. He exerted control initially over the promised land. Right after Alexander died and the kingdom was split up, Ptolemy the first dominated this particular region. All right. Notice it says he's going to have one of his princes is going to be strong. Well, he had a prince. His prince's name was Seleucus, and he rose to power and took dominion over the region of Syria. All right. He became more powerful than the former Egyptian ruler. All right. So that area that Seleucus controlled, the people are called Seleucids. All right. They are identified with the kings of the north, and then the Ptolemies were the kings of the south. All right. And these two dynasties fought back and forth for 130 years, just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And whoever was stronger at any particular time, they had dominion over the Holy Land. All right. They were in control of the Holy Land. Holy Land was central to all of it. It was a back and forth affair between the north and the south. All right. Verses 6 to 20. We're not going to read them all straight, but they're going to deal with that 130 years. What's going to happen during that 130 years? Verses 6 to 20. Starting with 6. You're going to be amazed at how detailed and specific this is. And at the end of some years, they will join forces. For the daughter of the king of the south will go to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she will not retain the power of her authority, and neither he nor his authority will stand, but she will be given up with those who brought her, and with him who begot her, and with him who strengthened her in these times. All right. This wouldn't make much sense if we didn't have history books. But guess what we have? We have history books. So we can put together exactly what Daniel's talking about here. They will join forces, joined by a marriage. All right. The kings of the north and the south were going to be allied for a time, but it wasn't going to last long. That was Daniel's prediction. This was fulfilled in the marriage between Antiochus II of the Seleucids, so the north, and Berenice, the daughter of Ptolemy II of the south. And because of that marriage, there was peace for a little while, exactly as Daniel predicted. But guess what? Ptolemy II died, and that changed everything. Where he said she will not retain the power of her authority. When Ptolemy II died, Antiochus II, the husband in this deal, put away Berenice and took back his former wife. All right. So Berenice did not retain the power of her authority, because now his former wife, Laodice, was back in the picture, and she was put aside. Now, as you can well imagine, none of this was real smooth by any of them. Laodice didn't trust her husband anymore. I don't know why. He just went and married someone else, Not sure why she didn't trust him, but she didn't trust him anymore. All right. So guess what she did? She had him poisoned. All right. She had him murdered by poisoning. Um, and it says she will be given up with those who brought her. After she poisoned Antiochus II, Laodice had Berenice, her infant son, and all her attendants killed. So Berenice is who he's talking about here when he says she will not retain the power of her authority. It's because she was put aside for his first wife. When it says she will be given up with those who brought her, that's her attendants, her infant son, and herself being murdered, assassinated by Laodice. And after this reign of terror here by this woman, Laodice set her son, Seleucus II, on the throne, all right, of the kingdom of Syria, the north. We got it all together. What did I tell you? Super specific, down to actual names that we can pinpoint names for these people that he's talking about. 7 to 9. But from a branch of her roots, one will arise in his place, who will come with an army, enter the fortress of the king of the north, and deal with them and prevail. And he shall also carry their gods captive to Egypt with their princes and their precious articles of silver and gold. He will continue more years than the king of the south. Also, the king of the north will come to the kingdom of the king of the south, but will return to his own land. All right. Again, really confusing if we didn't have history books. We've got them. So a branch of her roots would come from the south and prevail over the kings of the north. This was fulfilled in Ptolemy the third. Notice we're going Seleucus first, Seleucus the second, Seleucus the third, Ptolemy the first, Ptolemy the second, Ptolemy the third. All right. This is fulfilled in the person of Ptolemy the third. He was the brother of Bernice, the one who was murdered. The branch of her roots. It's her brother who fulfilled this. After his sister was murdered, Ptolemy the third, for revenge on Laodice, invaded Syria and humbled her son, Seleucus II, who was on the throne at the time. And it goes on to say he will continue more years than the king of the north. Well, by golly, Ptolemy III lived 4 years longer than Seleucus II lived. All right. Spot on accuracy about who the actors were, how they would engage, even to the point of who's going to live longer. Daniel was spot on. Verse 10. However, his sons will stir up strife. You know, I was thinking this will make an unbelievable TV program. It's like a Game of Thrones written all over it. It really is. But however, his sons will stir up strife and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one will certainly come and overwhelm and pass through. Then he will return to his fortress and stir up strife. All right. So the sons of the kings of the north are going to continue the battle. And one of the sons is going to conquer the Holy Land, says he's going to overwhelm and pass through it, which is the buffer zone between the north and the south, with the assemblance of a great force. This was fulfilled in Seleucus III. All right, Seleucus III. Seleucus II had just been humbled. Seleucus III fulfills this along with Antiochus III. Seleucus III, Antiochus III, both the sons of Seleucus II, both the grandsons of Laodice, who had Berenice murdered. Okay. Both of them were successful generals, but Seleucus III only ruled for a very short time before he was succeeded by his brother. And in a really fierce battle, Antiochus III took over the Holy Land from the dominion of the Ptolemies. All right. So this is the back and forth, 130 years of this, back and forth. 11 and 12. And the king of the south will be moved with rage and go out and fight with him, with the king of the north, who will muster a great multitude. But the multitude will be given into the hand of his enemy. When he has taken away the multitude, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cast down tens of thousands, but he will not prevail. All right. Let's get what it means first, and then we'll go with what is fulfilled. The angel said that the king of the south was going to attack, and he's going to meet a great multitude of soldiers from the north. The king of the north, though, was going to lose the battle. His multitude was going to be defeated. All right. This was fulfilled, and we even have the name of the battle here. Antiochus III was defeated at the Battle of Raphia. All right. When he lost that battle, he was forced to give back dominion of the Holy Land to the south, to the Ptolemies. He was forced to give it back because he lost. He had a bigger army, but he lost the battle. All right, and was forced to give the Holy Land back. Y'all with me? I know it's a lot. Yeah. 13 to 16. For the king of the north will return and muster a multitude greater than the former, and certainly come at the end of some years with a great army and much equipment. Now, in those times, many will rise up against the king of the south. Also, violent men of your people will exalt themselves in fulfillment of the vision, but they will fail. So the king of the north will come and build a siege mound and take a fortified city, and the forces of the south shall not withstand him. Even his choice troops shall have no strength to resist. But he who comes against him will do according to his own will, and no one will stand against him. He will stand in the glorious land with destruction in his power. All right. So the north, look, this is a crazy 130 years, isn't it? The north is going to answer back here. All right. And they're going to come and defeat the king of the south in this extended siege, which was fairly common in those days. And that victory is going to give the king of the north back dominion of what they call the glorious land or the Holy Land. All right. Um, this will fulfill when Antiochus III did raise another huge army, invaded Egypt again, and finally got control over the armies of, we're on Ptolemy part 5 now. All right. Ptolemy the Fifth. He's going to gain control over those armies and over the Holy Land. All right. When it says many shall rise up against the king of the south, including violent men of your people, Jews living in the Holy Land helped. They helped Antiochus III overcome Ptolemy V. They were involved in it. This was because the Jewish people resented the rule of the Egyptian Ptolemies. They were tired of it. So even though Antiochus was a liberator in their mind, he was no better, but they were just siding with, I guess the one was the worst and one wasn't quite as bad. All right, so they sided with Antiochus. They initially welcomed him, but it didn't work out because you see what it says? He turned destruction upon the glorious land. All right, so their assistance was not really valued, was not really treasured, and definitely was not appreciated and thanked. Okay. Verse 17. He shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom and upright ones with him. Thus shall he do. And he shall give him the daughter of women to destroy it, but she will not stand with him nor be before him. All right. So the king of the north, who now rules over the Holy Land, all right, it's been back and forth. He now rules the Holy Land, is also going to attempt to dominate and destroy the king of the south at this point. He's going to make one attempt by giving the king of the south the daughter of women to destroy, but this plot would not succeed. All right, that's how we're seeing it. She will not stand with him. We know exactly what Daniel was talking about. This will fulfill when Antiochus III gave his daughter Cleopatra to Ptolemy V of Egypt. He hoped to gain permanent influence by doing this. That was the mission. All right. And eventually he would have liked to control Egypt in its entirety. So there would no longer be a kingdom of the north and south, just a kingdom. Unfortunately, the plan didn't work because Cleopatra wasn't faithful to her Egyptian husband at all. She did him no favors. All right. Now, this is not the Cleopatra, the famous Cleopatra of history. All right. Just so we know. But it was an ancestor of her. All right. About 100 years later, the Cleopatra we all know from the movies came into being as an ancestor of this Cleopatra. All right. But the plan failed because, as Daniel said, she will not stand with him, and she didn't. All right. 18 and 19. After this, he will turn his face to the coastlands and shall take many. But a ruler will bring the reproach against him to an end, and with the reproach removed, he will turn back on him. Then he will turn his face toward the fortresses of his own land, but he will stumble and fall and not be found. All right. So he made this effort through his daughter Cleopatra. It was a disappointing effort. It didn't work. So he turns his attention to the coastlands. That's what the angel's telling him. Until he's stopped by one who, as Daniel says, was formerly under reproach, and he's going to stumble and fall and not be found. All right. We know the fulfillment to this. Antiochus III, after this failure, turned his attention to Asia Minor and Greece. That's where he turned next. He was helped by a general you might know. Ever hear of a guy named Hannibal? We've all heard of Hannibal, right? He was helped by Hannibal, the famous general from Carthage. But there was a group of people that got involved on the other side. Not a good group, not for Antiochus. They were the Romans. All right. The Romans were coming into power here. And they got involved and they helped defeat Antiochus in Greece. Antiochus had a mission to humiliate Greece, and look what happened. It went the other way around. Rome came to their aid, and together they turned him back and defeated him. He went back to his former regions that he had left, that he still had control over. He lost everything he gained in all his pursuits. He lost, and then finally died short after. Um, Interestingly, how he died, he was running out of money because of all his gambles, all his wars that he started trying to gain land, and he needed money really badly for his treasury. And he decided, I'm going to pillage a Babylonian temple. I'm going to pillage this temple, and that'll give me some of the money I need. And local citizens got enraged and murdered him on sight when he tried to do this. So he had a very, very inglorious reign, glorious end. He had great designs. He had designs to be the next Alexander, probably. It didn't turn out. It didn't work out for him. Verse 20, there shall arise in his place one who imposes taxes on the glorious kingdom. But within a few days he will be destroyed, but not in anger, nor in battle. All right. So after this inglorious end of the king of the north, his successor is going to take over. He's going to raise taxes, and it's not going to go well for him. All right. That's what the prediction is. This was filled in the very, very brief reign of Seleucus III. All right. This was the eldest son of Antiochus III. And what he's trying to do, remember his dad was killed trying to pillage a temple to get money into the treasury. Well, when his father died, money didn't just magically appear. All right. The treasury's still in trouble. And so Seleucus III is now in charge, and he needs money. So he decides to tax his dominion, which included the Holy Land at this time, included the glorious kingdom, the Holy Land, to increase his revenues. He actually had a plan to pillage a temple of Jerusalem. Now, look, his dad was just killed pillaging a Babylonian temple. It doesn't seem like a great idea. But interestingly enough, Josephus tells us that one of his ambassadors had an angelic vision and said, you can't do this. It's not going to end well if you do. Don't do it. So he didn't raid the temple. All right. He decided against that. So he just raised the taxes. Very shortly after this, Antiochus IV, his brother, assassinated him. All right. In order to take control. And that's where we come to the end of the 130 years of the back and forth battle and dominion. And we'll start into this next section here because Antiochus IV is the one. He's the one who calls himself Epiphanes, the illustrious, the glorious. All right. And I don't think you could introduce him any better than verse 21. And in his place will arise a vile person to whom they will not give the honor of royalty, but he shall come in peaceably and seize the kingdom by intrigue. Okay. So after the brief reign of Seleucus III, the next king is going to be a vile person, will not be recognized as royalty, but will take power by what they call intrigue. Okay. This is Antiochus IV, and he did not come to the throne legitimately because everybody thought, and probably rightly so, that he murdered his brother. All right. And guess what? Even back then, you didn't just get to murder people and then become king. All right. There still were some rules and some honors and regulations going on. But the only other heir was the son of another son of Seleucus II, who was imprisoned in Rome. Guess who imprisoned him? Antiochus IV had him imprisoned. All right. So there really was no option. It says he will come in peaceably. And apart from the murder of his brother, if that's true, if he's the one that did it, he did come in rather peaceably. He didn't use terror to gain power. We know from history that Antiochus used flattery, lies, a very smooth tongue, what the Bible calls intrigue. All right, that's how he got into power. He is the one that took the title Epiphanes, basically calling himself the glorious one. It translates to Antiochus the glorious or Antiochus the illustrious. All right, thought a lot of himself. All right, he's pretty pleased with himself. What's the Bible say? Really, he was vile. All right, he was a vile person. And if you gain the notoriety of Antichrist of the Old Testament, well, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? How vile do you have to be to gain that title? All right. I think we're going to stop there. The introduction to Antiochus Epiphanes, because now it really gets serious. Because remember, Daniel's being told about these appointed time. It's going to be long. It's going to be a lot of trouble. All right. And there has been a lot of trouble in this vision as it was fulfilled. There's a lot of trouble for the people of Israel because guess where they were? Smack dab in the middle of a 130-year-old civil war, basically. All right. That's where they were stuck. But you know what's sad? Compared to what's coming, those were the good times. All right. Compared to what's coming under Antiochus Epiphanes, those were the good times. And we'll get into what he did. And again, it's super specific. And then we're going to see this transition very clearly from Antiochus Epiphanes to the Antichrist, the latter days, future revelation, this near far prophecy that Daniel's so famous for, that many of the Bible prophets are famous for. We get to see a lot of this unbelievably accurate predictions. And I love chapter 11 because when you make general statements like the Greeks are going to be next, that's pretty impressive. When you say Berenice is going to be murdered by Laodicea and her sons are going to take over, and they're going to be murdered, that's incredible because you're able to look at the future, 300 years in the future, and put names to the events, put names of battles to the events, put names of kings to the events, for something that was written hundreds of years before. Incredible prophecy. So this is where we'll end, introducing this next gentleman, Antiochus IV, and we'll pick it up from there. Probably drift into chapter 12 next week, finish the week after. So, all right, any questions or comments? Or
do you know what the reason why in verse number 3, chapter 10, that he mentioned what he was eating? Do you think it was to make him think that you're not hallucinating, that you were mourning and you weren't eating at all?
I just don't know
why I don't know why they said that's what he ate.
Yeah, it was. Most of the commentators said that this was not a full fast. He wasn't in that kind of mourning where he was sackcloth and ashes and not eating at all, but he was performing some sort of self-denial while he was in this state of mourning. Why he was so particular, he says, I eat no pleasant food. Well, that's subjective, right?
Right.
There are a lot of things that I think are pleasant that you all would hate and vice versa. But what's important to Daniel is if he considered it pleasant, he didn't eat it. All right. No wine touched his lips, no meat touched his lips because he was in this mourning. And the commentators they're really back and forth. Is this mourning because he's telling this story after he saw the vision and he's mourning for his people? But then you see that he's in mourning and then the angel comes to explain what's going on. So it appears to be mourning before. He's upset about something before, and we don't know what it is, other than maybe it's what we said earlier. Maybe it's not enough Jews went back, or Ezra was facing opposition to building the temple. He wasn't getting the support he needed. But that's how Daniel did it. It says, I didn't anoint myself at all till 3 weeks were fulfilled. It's really an odd, the whole chapter 10 is really, it's, I don't want to say out there because it's scriptural. I don't mean it that way. What I mean is that it's difficult to understand. Chapter 10 is really rough, and that's just the precursor to the vision. That's just Daniel telling this is what's going on before I get all this information. But yeah, we don't know why he was exactly why he was mourning, and we don't know why he was just self-denying himself good food. We're not sure 100%.
Yeah, I think we could probably do this lesson 4 weeks in a row and start to grasp it. There's a lot of content there.
Uh-huh. My brain's exploding.
It really is. And you said 4 weeks in a row. I had to read it 400 times before my brain worked. I couldn't. It was a struggle. But once you start seeing
there's a lot there.
Yeah, and you're seeing the generations of the dynasties with Antiochus the second, the third, Seleucus the second, the third, Ptolemy the first through the fifth. You can start seeing that timeline run down on this prophecy and how it all came to be until we get to Antiochus the fourth. And really, it's all leading to that. Because, like I said, the Jewish troubles were troublesome, but nothing compared to what's coming under this gentleman or this vile person.
I just did a quick Google search on Antiochus the fourth, and there's just this list of everything he did to the Jews.
He was something, and we're gonna see most of it, and that's why if Daniel was upset before, after he hears what's going to happen under this gentleman, he's gonna be more upset. So, so we'll cover that next week and dip into 12 because it continues in 12, but it's future, so future to us. So, all right, awesome, Rick. Would you mind leading us out?
I will.
I appreciate it.
Heavenly Father, we just once again we just thank you for this night that we can come together and learn, and we thank you for the amazing research that Bill does and his study. We pray too that we can be like Daniel, praying persistently and never ceasing. But sometimes it takes a while for prayers to get answered. And like we said tonight, wait is what we don't want to hear, but sometimes not sometimes, but all the time, it's your perfect timing. So we pray for those that aren't with us tonight, for Bill and Richard, and just pray that they come back to us next week when we study again. And right now, we just a special prayer for our country, our leaders, and the unrest that's taking place in our world right now. We just pray that the leaders reach out to you and seek you for wisdom and guidance, and let us do the right things. And plus those who are going to watch this study later, we thank you for those that do join in at a different time. So we're very glad that this study does reach more than just those that are on here tonight. And we ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. And if you're interested, I really encourage you to read chapter 11 or book 11, chapter 8. It's a 6 to 7 minute read, really quick, but it's fascinating if you're a history buff. So have at it if you can.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you so much.
You have a good night.
Thank you all.
You too.
Y'all too.
Bye, everybody.
Bye,
everyone.
Bye, Shirley. Terry.